My own daughter looked at me and said, "We don't need you at the wedding." I smiled quietly and stayed calm, but the very next week, I sold the wedding dress I had been saving for her. When she saw who wore it in the ceremony, her face went pale. Before I share what really happened, make sure you subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you are watching from. My name is Helen Carter. I am 68 years old, a retired school teacher, and a widow. For most of my life, I have lived for my only daughter, Emily. I raised her after my husband passed away, doing everything I could to give her the best life. Every extra hour I worked, every sacrifice I made was for her future. When Emily got engaged, I thought it would be the happiest moment of our lives. I dreamed of helping her plan the wedding, of standing by her side, of watching her wear the dress I had saved for her. That dress was more than fabric to me. It was a symbol of love, sacrifice, and the hope of passing something meaningful to my daughter. But as the wedding planning moved forward, I noticed Emily was pulling away from me. She rarely asked for my opinion. Her fiancé kept our conversations short, and when I offered to help with the dress, the flowers, or the ceremony, she always said, "We've got it under control." One evening at dinner, when I gently reminded her that I had kept a wedding dress for her, she snapped. Her voice was cold, sharp, and louder than I had ever heard it. "Mom, we don't need you at the wedding. It's our day, and you'll just make things awkward." The words pierced through me like a knife. My hands shook under the table, but I kept my face calm. I simply nodded and said, "If that's what you want, Emily." On the outside, I looked composed. On the inside, my heart was breaking into pieces. In that moment, I realized that the daughter I had loved and raised no longer saw me as a part of her happiest day. I went home that night with the dress still hanging in my closet, a reminder of all the dreams I once had for her and the bitter reality of how far we had grown apart. After that dinner, the silence between Emily and me grew heavier with every passing day. I still saw her posts online about wedding preparations, pictures of flower samples, the rehearsal dinner menu, even her bridesmaids trying on their gowns. But I was never included. My name, my presence, my role as her mother was missing, and the absence was loud enough to break me. The wedding dress remained in my closet, wrapped carefully in its protective cover. I had bought it many years ago when I was younger, thinking one day Emily would wear it with pride. It wasn't a designer label or a flashy gown, but it was timeless. Lace sleeves, a flowing skirt, and a simple elegance that made it special. Each time I walked past that closet, the sight of the dress felt like a wound. It was as if the dress was silently asking me, wasn't I meant for her? Family gatherings became unbearable. My relatives, who once praised me for being such a dedicated mother, now looked at me with pity. Some tried to comfort me, while others gossiped. One afternoon, my sister-in-law leaned close and whispered, "Helen, is it true Emily doesn't want you at the wedding?" Her words stung more than she realized. I forced a smile, replying, "It's her choice. I just want her to be happy." But inside, shame burned through me. I had raised Emily alone, given her everything I could, and now I was being cast aside as though I were a stranger. The whispers only grew. At church, a friend I'd known for years asked, "Are you helping Emily with her dress?" When I shook my head, she frowned and said, "That's unusual." Each conversation reminded me of what I had lost, not just my role in Emily's wedding, but my place in her life. It wasn't only the words of others that hurt. The cruelest moments came directly from Emily herself. A week after that dinner, I called her to ask if she needed any help with the final arrangements. Her response was sharp and impatient. "Mom, I already told you. We don't need you involved. Please stop pushing." I sat in silence, gripping the phone, and after a moment I said quietly, I'm not pushing, Emily. I just wanted to be there for you. She sighed heavily and muttered, "You've done enough already." Then she hung up. Those 4 words, "You've done enough already," echoed in my mind all night. What did she mean by enough? Had my years of sacrifice, working late shifts to pay for her college, sitting through her tears during heartbreaks, and cheering for her during her milestones, had all of it been too much? Or did she simply mean that I was no longer needed? The emotional weight pressed harder when Melissa, one of Emily's closest friends, made a cruel comment during a bridal shower that I wasn't invited to, but later heard about. She had said to a cousin of mine, "Emily doesn't need old traditions holding her back. That dress of Helen's? It's outdated. It belongs in a museum, not a wedding." When those words reached me, I sat alone in my kitchen, staring at the untouched cup of tea in front of me. Tears welled up in my eyes, not just because of the insult to the dress, but because of what it symbolized. It wasn't about fabric or lace. It was about the years of love, sacrifice, and memory stitched into every seam. To hear it dismissed so casually was like hearing that my love itself was worthless. In those quiet nights, I often spoke to my late husband in my prayers. "I don't understand what happened," I whispered into the silence. "I gave her everything we dreamed of giving her. Why does she hate me for it?" There was no answer, only the hollow echo of my own voice in the empty house. I began to realize the conflict was no longer about the wedding itself. It was about respect. My daughter didn't just exclude me from her big day. She erased me from her life's most important moment. And that hurt deeper than anything I had ever experienced. Still, I couldn't bring myself to fight her. I loved her too much, even as she pushed me away. But inside, something began to shift. A quiet voice told me that staying silent wasn't enough. If I kept accepting this treatment, I would lose myself completely. The dress hanging in the closet became more than just a reminder of rejection. It became a symbol of choice. Either I could keep it hidden away, letting it rot in silence, or I could do something bold, something that showed Emily and everyone else that I was not invisible. For weeks, I carried that thought with me, letting it grow stronger each time Emily's coldness cut into me. I didn't yet know what I would do, but I knew one thing clearly. I would not let my life sacrifices be dismissed as enough already. The conflict was no longer about a seat at a wedding. It was about reclaiming my dignity. The longer the dress stayed in my closet, the heavier it felt on my heart. Every time I opened that door, I saw it hanging there, untouched, as if waiting for a moment that would never come. It wasn't just a piece of clothing to me. It carried the weight of my hopes, my sacrifices, and my dreams for Emily. But now it had become a reminder of her rejection, of her words echoing in my ears. "We don't need you at the wedding." One morning, I sat on the edge of my bed staring at the closet door. My chest felt heavy. My eyes burned with tears I had cried too many times already. I realized that if I kept holding on to the dress, I would keep holding on to the pain. Emily had rejected not only me, but also everything the dress represented. And in that moment, I made a quiet decision. I wouldn't let the dress rot in darkness. I would give it a new life with someone who would treasure it. I called Rachel, my niece, who had always been by my side. She was more like a daughter to me than Emily had been in recent years. When she heard my voice on the phone, she immediately knew something was wrong. "Aunt Helen? What happened?" she asked gently. I swallowed hard and said, "I've decided to sell the wedding dress." There was a pause. Then Rachel said firmly, "Are you sure? That dress meant everything to you." "Yes," I replied quietly. "It did. But it doesn't mean anything to Emily. She doesn't want it. She doesn't even want me. I'd rather it go to someone who sees its value than keep it hidden in a closet where it will only remind me of heartbreak." Rachel's voice soft. If that's what you feel, then I'll support you. And Aunt Helen, don't think of this as giving up. Think of it as setting yourself free. The next day, I carefully folded the dress into its box and carried it to a small bridal boutique downtown. The shop was bright and welcoming, with rows of gowns displayed on mannequin. The owner, a kind woman with soft eyes, greeted me warmly. "Good morning. How can I help you today?" she asked. I placed the box gently on the counter. "I have a gown I'd like to sell. It's never been worn." When she lifted the dress out of the box, her eyes widened. "This is beautiful, timeless. The lacework alone is stunning." As she held it up to the light, a young woman and her mother walked into the shop. The girl gasped the moment she saw the dress. "Oh, Mom, look at that one," she whispered. Her mother smiled. "It's lovely. Try it on." The shop owner looked at me for permission, and I nodded. I stood quietly as the girl disappeared into the fitting room. Minutes later, she stepped out wearing the gown, her eyes shimmering with tears. She twirled in front of the mirror, her smile bright. "It's perfect," she said softly, her voice full of awe. "It feels like it was meant for me." Something inside me shifted as I watched her. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel sorrow. I felt relief. The dress had found someone who would love it, someone who would wear it with pride, not disdain. The girl turned to me and said, "Thank you for bringing this dress here. I'll take such good care of it." I smiled through my tears and replied, "That's all I ever wanted, for it to be loved." The boutique owner finalized the paperwork, and as I walked out of the shop, a strange lightness filled my chest. The dress was gone, but the pain that had clung to it was gone too. I wasn't holding on to Emily's rejection anymore. I had made a choice, not out of anger, but out of dignity. Later that evening, Rachel came by with groceries. When I told her the dress had been sold, she hugged me tightly. "You did the right thing, Aunt Helen. You turned her insult into your strength." I nodded, though part of me still ached. I didn't know then that this decision would set the stage for something much bigger. The dress wasn't just sold, it was about to make a reappearance in the most unexpected place. And when it did, Emily would finally realize the weight of what she had thrown away. The morning of Emily's wedding arrived, and for the first time in my life I didn't feel like a mother preparing for her daughter's big day. I wasn't ironing a dress, fixing flowers, or waiting for the car to take us to the church. Instead, I sat alone in my quiet kitchen, sipping tea from a chipped cup that had belonged to my late husband. The silence around me was deafening, yet it carried a strange peace. I had already made my choice weeks earlier, and I was ready to live with it. I had decided not to attend. I would not sit in the back, ignored and whispered about, as though I were nothing more than an unwanted guest. Emily had made her wishes clear, and I would respect them. But in my heart, I knew the day would still carry my presence, just not in the way she expected. As I sat by the window, the sun streaming in, my thoughts kept drifting to the gown I had sold. I wondered who was wearing it that day, whether it was the young bride I saw at the boutique or someone else who had fallen in love with it. A part of me smiled at the idea that somewhere out there, the dress was fulfilling its purpose, shining proudly in the way it was meant to. Hours later, I received a call from Rachel. Her voice was low but filled with energy. "Aunt Helen, you won't believe what just happened." "What is it?" I asked, my heart suddenly racing. Rachel hesitated for a moment, then said, "Your dress. It's here. At Emily's wedding. Someone is wearing it." For a moment I couldn't breathe. I pressed the phone tighter to my ear, my pulse pounding. "What do you mean?" Rachel whispered quickly. "The cousin of the groom. She bought it. She's walking down the aisle in your gown, and everyone is talking about it." My chest tightened. I leaned back in my chair, overwhelmed by a mix of shock, pride, and a flicker of sadness. The very dress Emily had dismissed as unworthy was now being admired by all the guests at her own wedding. Rachel continued. When she walked in, people gasped. The whispers started right away. "Isn't that Helen's dress? Didn't she save that for Emily? You should have seen Emily's face." She turned pale the second she recognized it. I closed my eyes and pictured the scene. Emily, standing there in her chosen gown, full of pride, only to see another woman wearing the very dress her mother had once dreamed of giving her. A dress she had scorned now shone brighter than anything she wore. Rachel added softly, "I think she finally realized what she threw away." At the ceremony, the tension was thick. Guests turned their heads, whispering in disbelief. The groom's cousin, blissfully unaware of the drama, twirled gracefully in the gown, smiling at the compliments she received. "It's so elegant," one guest murmured. "Classic and beautiful." Another added, "Helen always had good taste. Emily should have worn it." Every comment chipped away at Emily's pride. She forced a smile for the crowd, but her eyes kept darting to the dress, her jaw tightening with each glance. Her bridesmaids noticed, too, exchanging uneasy looks. Even Melissa, the friend who had once mocked the gown as outdated, stood speechless, her confidence crumbling as admiration poured toward the dress. Rachel, who was seated near the front, later told me she leaned toward Emily during a quiet moment and whispered, "Your mother wanted this dress to be loved. Now it finally is." Emily didn't, but her lips trembled and she looked away. Back at home, I imagined it all unfolding. The dress I had cherished for so long was no longer hidden in my closet, collecting dust. It was living, admired, celebrated, and the irony of it all was undeniable. The daughter who told me I wasn't needed had to stand in the shadow of a gown that carried my love and sacrifice. For once, I didn't feel pain at her rejection. I felt strength. I had chosen not to fight, not to argue, but to act in silence. And in that silence, I had spoken louder than words ever could. As Rachel described the rest of the day, I listened with a calm heart. "People kept asking about you," she said. "They wanted to know why you weren't there. Some even whispered that Emily had made a mistake keeping you away. Aunt Helen, you weren't in the room, but your presence was stronger than anyone's." When she said that, tears filled my eyes. Not because I wanted revenge, but because in that moment, dignity had been restored. Emily had learned, whether she admitted it or not, that she could not erase me. My love, my choices, my strength had left their mark in the most unexpected way. The climax of this story was not about humiliation. It was about truth. A truth Emily had to face in front of everyone, that her mother's worth could never be dismissed, no matter how hard she tried. That evening, as the wedding carried on, I sat quietly at home, a candle burning beside Thomas's photograph. I whispered to him, "Did you see it?" The dress finally had its moment, and in my heart, I felt his answer. Not in words, but in the warmth that filled the room. In the days following the wedding, I expected silence, and that is exactly what I received. Emily didn't call, didn't text, and didn't visit. At first I thought perhaps she was too busy with her honeymoon, but deep down, I knew the real reason. Shame. The image of that dress, worn by another woman in her own ceremony, must have haunted her every moment. Rachel, however, visited me almost immediately. She came into the kitchen with her usual bright energy, carrying a basket of fruit and a warm smile. "Aunt Helen," she said softly, placing the basket down, "I need to tell you something. Everyone noticed. Everyone talked about it." I raised my eyebrows. "Talked about what?" "The dress," she replied. "People whispered all throughout the wedding. Some guests said it was the most beautiful gown they'd ever seen. Others said it was a shame that Emily didn't wear it. A few even asked me why you weren't there." Rachel took my hand. "Your absence was louder than your presence would have been. I felt tears prick my eyes, but not from sadness. It was a strange mix of vindication and peace. I had been erased by my daughter, but the truth had written me back into the story. Without raising my voice, without stepping foot inside the church, I had been seen. Later that week, I received a call from my sister-in-law. She had been at the wedding and didn't hold back her opinion. "Helen," she said firmly, "you were the talk of the evening. People were appalled that Emily treated you the way she did. And when they saw that gown, your gown, being worn by someone else, it only made them realize what she had lost." I listened quietly, my heart both heavy and light. Heavy because no mother wants her daughter to be humiliated, but light because perhaps, at last, Emily might begin to understand. It wasn't until nearly 2 weeks later that Emily showed up at my door. I had just finished watering the garden when I saw her standing by the gate, her hands clenched at her side. She looked smaller than I remembered, her confidence stripped away. "Mom," she said quietly when I opened the door. Her voice cracked. "Can we talk?" I nodded and led her inside. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where she had once told me I wasn't needed. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then she finally whispered, "I saw the dress." I recognized it immediately, and I realized I threw away something beautiful. Not just the gown, but you. Her words broke me, but not in the same way they had before. This time the tears that fell were not only of pain, but of release. I reached across the table and took her hand. "Emily," I said softly, "all I ever wanted was respect. Not money, not recognition. Just respect for the years I gave you, for the love I poured into you." She lowered her head, ashamed. I was selfish. I thought I was proving I didn't need anyone, but I see now. I needed you most of all. I just didn't know how to admit it. I sighed, squeezing her hand gently. Respect is not something you can demand. It's something you give freely. That dress was a symbol of my love. When you pushed it aside, you pushed me aside too. But love doesn't die that easily. I still forgive you, Emily. But forgiveness doesn't erase the hurt. We will need time. Tears streamed down her face as she nodded. In that moment, I knew the road to healing would be long, but at least there was a beginning. After she left, I sat by the window, looking out at the garden Thomas had planted years ago. The sun set slowly, painting the sky in warm colors. For the first time in weeks, I felt at peace. The dress was gone, but it had done its work. It had spoken the truth louder than I ever could. The lesson was clear to me. Sometimes silence is stronger than words. Sometimes letting go is more powerful than holding on. And sometimes the only way to teach someone the value of love is to let them feel the weight of losing it. That night, I placed Thomas's photo on the table beside me, lit a small candle, and whispered, "She learned, finally, not in the way we wanted, but she learned." And in that quiet, I felt his presence, steady and comforting. I knew then that I would continue living with dignity, no matter what came next. I wasn't invisible. I wasn't discarded. I was a mother who had given everything, and in the end, the truth of that could not be hidden. If you believe every parent deserves love and respect for their sacrifices, subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you are watching from.